Thank you. I have proposed 2 amendments to cut funding for TSA and Program 000 under Head 158, $895,000 equivalent to the money for paying the staff in Environment Bureau. I heard the Secretaries for Education's reply last week, and now is the time for conclusion of the debate. I'd like to elaborate on my proposal to cut the Secretary's pay. To cut Mr. Eddie Ng's salary is a gesture to vindicate us, to do justice for us, because we'll talk about 3 months' salary, and after these 3 months, he will still be entitled to get his very generous ex gratia end of contract payment. We have to ensure that people or secretary is accountable to the public because of the many problems and issues and the negative issues. He doesn't deserve his pay. Eddie Ng has got 2 nicknames. One is Good for Nothing, and the other one is Simon Fan. And that means he is a waste of space. And this has come from the uppermost echelon of the Education Bureau, when education officials wanted to brief him on our policies and measures on education. He couldn't care less, and therefore officials made up this nickname, and this was frequently quoted by a columnist in Mingpao, a local newspaper. I just want to say that education officials have had a very hard time, all because of this head of bureau, and they had to cover for him, and they could not give full play to their potential. The performance of the bureau has been greatly hampered because of this leader. The secretary hasn't been devoted to his duties. Is in fact the Secretary for Tourism in Hong Kong. He's the genuine Secretary for Tourism in Hong Kong. And that did not start when he assumed office as a Secretary for Education. When he was the chairman of a relevant committee under the Hong Kong EAA, we could already see signs. Back then, the Hong Kong EAA had to fight for recognition by other educational authorities of DSE, and then officials had to lobby overseas educational institutions. That should be the duty of our professional educational officials. Mr. Eddie Ng, although he was not a professional, he was just a chairman of the subcommittee, and he fought hard to be part of the delegation. When he first assumed office in the EB, he stressed that he had to go on duty visits. Other things could leave for the time being, but he had to go on overseas visits. Well, when he first assumed office, there was the task of giving 15 years of free education. That's the promise by CY Leung and his platform. He said that he had to go on overseas visits. One of the destinations was Vietnam. To learn from KG education in Vietnam, why is it such an important thing? Even officials from the Bureau were baffled. Looking back the past few years, Eddie Ng, Secretary for Education, had made so-called duty visits numerous. From 2012-13, he made 4 visits, and the number grew to 17 times in 2016-17. The total expenses involved in these 5 years was as much as $3.16 million, compared to his predecessor, Mr. Michael Soon. Well, he made only 17 visits, and 4 years of visits are only $1 odd million. That's a big difference.
Over the years, have we ever heard of the permanent secretary or the undersecretary leading the delegations? Most of these visits are headed up by Mr. Kin-yuen, and there are delegations that don't need him as the leader. He's still going there. About a month or so ago, he was arranging for an overseas visit towards the end of his term. This kind of attitude is not the right attitude to his work. He doesn't go anywhere. Last March, there was an ISTP meeting in Berlin. There's International Summit on Teaching Profession. So it is an international conference on teaching profession. In 2011, the US started this, and it was held in New York for the first time. The world attached a great deal of importance. Hong Kong was represented in the meeting, and this is now held by OECD. The education ministers from scores of countries are attending. This is an important and effective international conference. Professor Chin Kai-ming from Hong Kong U also gave prominent coverage to that in his column. I received notifications or reminders from the organizing party whether the Secretary for Education would be attending. I was surprised why I was asked, and it was only there that I discovered that the Secretary wasn't there. And the organizing party told the attendees that the next event will be held in Hong Kong. But I've never heard anything from the Secretary about this event. And I was surprised, and I asked the OECD organizing party what happened. I was told that the Secretary for Education never bothered to respond to inquiries from the organizing parties. And in fact, a year or so ago, everybody knew that it's going to be held in Hong Kong. People had a high expectation of that, but the Secretary never bothered to reply, and eventually there was no formal application for this to happen in Hong Kong, so eventually they moved this to Scotland. Now that's fine. It doesn't have to be held in Hong Kong in the first place, but this kind of evasive attitude leaves a bad taste in the mouth in the international community, and this is bringing shame and disgrace to Hong Kong. Let's come back to home here in Hong Kong. What is the relationship with LegCo? Over the years, Eddie Ng was not working hard enough and never bothered to meet LegCo members. I lodged a complaint with the CS, Mrs. Carrie Lam, and asked why he never bothered to meet LegCo members. We all understand that many policy bureaus would make it a point to meet LegCo members and brief them on the way forward, on the legislative programs and so on in the coming years. Over the years, I can count how many briefings we've been given by the Education Bureau. As a member from the Democratic camp, I didn't have the opportunity to share my views with the Secretary. Now, even a heavyweight pro-establishment members have complained likewise. They will understand that Mr. Lam Tai-fai, chairman of the education panel for the last term, Mr. Lam also complained that there was a lack of opportunity to communicate with Kin-yuen because he never bothered talking to members. I think the most serious one is at the beginning of April this year, there was a round of attack on me online. There were texts being circulated, and one of them is the harm caused by the Professional Teachers Union and Kin-yuen. They were trying to smear me, and we're quite used to this kind of circulation of rumors online. It was later that we found that Mr. Kin-yuen was part of it, and he was trying to attack members from the functional education functional constituency, and this has to be a big scandal. I understand that Mr. Ng is nearing the end of his term. I don't really want to waste too much time, and I'm sure that people can exercise their judgment, those who receive these kind of texts. But as an accountable official, as a secretary, I think it is the first time that a secretary is part of an attack on LegCo members. Mr. Ng is not concentrating on his core business. He didn't attend the hearings, the deputations hearings for the whole length of them. Now we discussed the children's suicide, and he attended half of the hearings. As a secretary, like LegCo members, will face a lot of issues, and the issues are happening concurrently. I think we have to weigh up the significance of the events. As a secretary, how on earth can you decide to stay away from the education panel for the public hearings? He attended an evening reception at Shantou as one of the guests of honors. Today, we have a number of officials here, and there is no sight of Mr. Kin on hand to listen to members' views. Mr. Chairman, the list of Mr. Ng's problems is endless. We've heard a lot about it. But I'd like to say that Mr. Ng's problem is exactly Mr. C.Y. Leung's problem. Mr. Ng was appointed as Secretary for Education, and C.Y. Leung never cared about his performance. He has replaced two secretaries, but has done nothing about Kin at all. For 5 years, the education sector has progressed no further, and I think the main problem lies with Kin. I hope I can take this opportunity to be fair to the people of Hong Kong and let them know the true face of the Secretary and what he has done over the years. He should be held responsible morally, legally, and so on. Hong Kong is an important international city. We should have a good enough education system. We should have a good enough education minister. I like to say that all public officers should know the extent of their responsibilities. I like to urge those who are dedicated not to be afraid of shouldering responsibilities. If we shy away from our responsibilities, then we end up with people like Ding, and this is something that Hong Kong cannot afford to have.